I never thought I'd find myself in this position. My name is Mark, and I was married to the woman of my dreams, Lisa, for almost 8 years. We had a cozy little house in suburbia, 2 dogs, and what I thought was a solid relationship. At least that's what I'd convinced myself. I'm not here to paint myself as some kind of saint. I know relationships take work, and I was committed to doing my part. But over the last few months, things had taken a strange turn. It started subtly. Lisa began spending more time with her colleagues at the tech startup where she worked. I understood that work was demanding, especially in the fast-paced tech world, but I noticed she was coming home later and later. Sometimes she'd casually toss out phrases like, "We're really grinding on this project," or "I've got to help with the launch this weekend." I'd brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, but the nagging feeling crept in, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. There were other signs, too. Little changes in her demeanor. She became more irritable and defensive over trivial things. When I asked her about her day, she'd shrug me off, saying she was tired or not in the mood to talk. The intimacy between us dwindled. The evenings that once held laughter and warmth turned into silence, with her buried in her phone or laptop. I tried to initiate conversations, but she would often dismiss me with a wave of her hand, claiming she had work to finish. Then there was the day I found the receipts. I was cleaning out the kitchen and stumbled upon a small envelope tucked in the back of a drawer. Curiosity got the better of me and I opened it. Inside were receipts for expensive dinners, dinners that certainly didn't include me. My heart raced as I scanned the names of the restaurants, some of the best in the city. I didn't recognize any of them. They weren't places we'd ever gone together. My stomach twisted as I put the pieces together. My instinct screamed that something was very wrong. I needed to confront her, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. What if I was just being paranoid? The thought was almost unbearable, but the nagging doubt wouldn't leave me alone. That evening, I decided to approach her calmly. I wanted to give her a chance to explain before I blew up and accused her of something I wasn't sure about. But when I asked her about the receipts, her reaction was immediate and defensive. "Why do you care?" She shot back, a mix of annoyance and surprise in her voice. "It's just dinner with my coworkers. You know how busy we are at work." I pressed her for details, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you didn't tell me about it. Why go out to dinner and not mention it? You used to share everything with me, Lisa." As I spoke, I could feel the tightness in my chest, the realization dawning that maybe this was more than just a late night at the office. She rolled her eyes, dismissing my concerns. "You're being ridiculous, Mark. It's just work stuff. I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of it." Her tone was laced with annoyance, but beneath that I sensed something else, fear. Over the next few days, everything came to a head. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I had to uncover the truth. I started snooping. I know it's not the most dignified approach, but I needed answers. I went through her messages, and that was when I stumbled upon a text thread that would change everything. It started innocently enough, but as I scrolled, my heart sank. There were flirty messages between her and someone named Jake. I didn't recognize the name at first, but as I read on, I found out he was the founder of the tech startup she worked for. My gut twisted with each passing text, and suddenly everything made sense. The late nights, the secretive behavior, the excuses, all of it added up to something I never wanted to accept. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal. This was the man she was sharing her life with while I was at home, blissfully unaware. I confronted her again that night, armed with the evidence I'd found. The adrenaline coursed through my veins as I prepared for the inevitable fallout. "Who the hell is Jake?" I demanded, my voice low but filled with fury. Lisa's eyes widened in shock, and I could see her scrambling for words. The facade she had built was crumbling, and I was determined to expose the truth behind her lies. Her explanation started pouring out, but all I could hear was the betrayal ringing in my ears. I needed to know the extent of her infidelity, and I was ready to fight for the truth. This was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. I could feel the weight of my world crashing down, but I also felt a spark igniting within me, an urge to reclaim my life from the chaos that had enveloped it. I knew I had to navigate this storm, and what came next would change everything. The confrontation was intense. Lisa's initial shock quickly morphed into anger. "How dare you? You had no right to invade my privacy," she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls of our once happy home. Each accusation felt like a dagger, but I stood my ground. "I wouldn't have had to if you hadn't been lying to me, Lisa." My jaw clenched as I tried to keep my emotions in check, fighting against the swell of rage and heartbreak. She attempted to justify her actions, weaving a tale that only made her guilt more palpable. "It was just harmless flirting, Mark. You can't honestly believe I'd do something like that." But I could hear the desperation in her voice. The words felt hollow, like a poorly constructed facade ready to collapse. "Harmless? How can you say that when you're texting another man behind my back?" Lisa stammered, grasping for excuses. "It wasn't like that. Jake is just someone I work with. He's been helping me with projects. I never meant for it to go this far." But I could see through her lies. Her eyes darted away from mine, avoiding the guilt that flickered across her face. I had seen that look before, but never directed at me. The emotional turmoil coursed through me like a raging river, pulling me under. Was it really just flirting? Or had it escalated to something more? Each question pounded in my mind like a relentless drumbeat. I could feel the tears welling up behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to show her that kind of weakness. "Just tell me the truth, Lisa. How far did it go? Did you sleep with him?" The accusation hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, silence reigned. Lisa's face paled, and I could see her weighing her options. I could almost hear her internal struggle. She could either continue lying or come clean, but either option would cost her dearly. Finally, she broke. "Yes, we had sex," she spat, her voice trembling with the weight of her admission. "But it meant nothing. I was confused. We were growing apart, and I just needed someone to talk to." The admission felt like a punch to the gut. I had expected it, but hearing it out loud shattered the remnants of my trust. "You needed someone to talk to? What about me, Lisa? I've been here trying to be the best husband I can be, only for you to betray me." My voice cracked as the anger turned to despair. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of an emotional cliff, ready to fall into the abyss below. Her defenses crumbled and the tears began to flow. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never wanted to hurt you." But her words were empty, mere echoes of regret. She had made her choices, and now she was left to grapple with the consequences. That night I barely slept. I tossed and turned, fighting against a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I replayed our relationship in my mind, all the happy memories now tainted by her infidelity. The romantic dinners, the vacations, the mundane moments that had once brought us joy, all of it was overshadowed by the knowledge of her betrayal. I couldn't wrap my head around how someone I trusted completely could do this to me. The next few days were a blur of chaos. I went through the motions of everyday life, eating, working, even pretending to be social with friends. But inside, I was crumbling. I tried to talk to Lisa, but every conversation felt like stepping on broken glass. The anger and hurt hung thick in the air, choking any chance of honest communication. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, anything to release the pent-up frustration boiling inside me. Eventually, I decided to take a step back and assess my situation. I needed to gather my thoughts to figure out what I really wanted. Should I fight for our marriage, or was it time to cut my losses? Each option was fraught with its own set of complications. The thought of rebuilding trust felt insurmountable, yet the idea of letting go of someone I had loved for so long felt equally terrifying. In the days that followed, I began to gather information about Jake, the man who had upended my life. I wanted to know what I was up against. I needed to understand the enemy. I discovered that he was a tech startup founder, charismatic and charming, with a reputation for sweeping women off their feet. As I learned more about him, a plan began to form in my mind. If Lisa thought she could just walk away from this unscathed, she was sorely mistaken. I couldn't just let them carry on with their lives while I wallowed in my heartbreak. I decided to expose Jake for the fraud I suspected he might be. I had to dig deeper, find out if there was more than just flirtation at play between them. I began to research his company, looking for any signs of wrongdoing. I wanted to uncover the truth. and if I found evidence that he was running some sort of scam, I'd make sure he faced the consequences. The thought of bringing down the man who had torn my marriage apart fueled my resolve. It was time for revenge, and I was going to make sure they both felt the weight of their actions. I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about taking back the power they had stripped away from me. As I delved deeper into my investigation, I steeled myself for the challenges ahead. I was ready to fight back. As I dove headfirst into my investigation of Jake, I tapped into every resource I had. I scoured the internet for information, looking for anything that could indicate that he was running a scam or had skeletons in his closet. I went to local business forums, scrutinized social media, and even reached out to former employees of his startup. I needed to know what I was dealing with. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, I stumbled upon a forum thread discussing tech startups that had gone under due to questionable practices. Among the names mentioned, one piqued my interest: Jake's company. The posts were filled with warnings and complaints about misleading business practices and consumers being left in the lurch. My pulse quickened as I read through the comments, absorbing the stories of others who had been affected. There were even allegations that Jake had misused investor funds. This was the lead I had been looking for. I spent hours following the trail, contacting individuals who had shared their experiences. After several conversations, I was able to piece together a damning narrative that painted Jake not just as a flirtatious entrepreneur, but as someone who took advantage of people for personal gain. The idea of using this information against him filled me with a sense of vindication. With every detail I uncovered, I could feel my determination grow. The emotional turmoil I had felt in the aftermath of Lisa's betrayal started to morph into something more potent, a burning desire for justice. I meticulously compiled evidence of Jake's misdeeds, including email exchanges, documents, and testimonies from former colleagues. I knew that if I wanted to expose him, I had to be thorough. I also knew I needed to confront Lisa again. She had to face the reality of the person she had chosen over me. So I called her one afternoon and asked to meet up. The tension hung heavy in the air as we sat across from each other at a small cafe. Lisa looked nervous, fidgeting with her hands as she avoided making eye contact. "Mark, please, I'm really sorry. I know I messed up and I want to fix this," she began, her voice shaky. But I wasn't interested in her apologies this time. I leaned in, staring straight into her eyes. "I've been doing some digging on Jake," I said, watching the color drain from her face. "You need to know who he really is." Her expression was a mixture of fear and defiance. "What are you talking about? You can't just make accusations like that," she protested, but I wasn't deterred. I pulled out my phone and started showing her snippets of the evidence I had gathered. "Look at this. People are saying he's a fraud. He's been misleading investors and putting companies in jeopardy. You're in way over your head, Lisa." Her eyes widened as she read through the comments and testimonies. I didn't know," she stammered, her confidence slipping away. "I thought he was just a charming entrepreneur. I never thought," her voice trailed off, and I could see the realization dawning on her. "You didn't think at all, did you? You just jumped into bed with him without considering the consequences." The bitterness in my tone was palpable, and I felt a surge of satisfaction as I watched her squirm. "You need to understand that this isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about the people he's hurt." Lisa's expression shifted from disbelief to fear. "What are you going to do? Are you going to tell people?" You'll ruin him." I leaned back, crossing my arms as I let her panic wash over me. "You didn't care about ruining me, Lisa. You didn't think twice about how your choices would affect our lives, our marriage. So why should I care about him?" I could see the wheels turning in her mind, desperately searching for a way to salvage her relationship with Jake. "What if we just forget this? I can end things with him and we can work on us," she proposed, desperation creeping into her voice. But I was done negotiating. "That's not how this works. You've broken my trust. And I'm not just going to sweep this under the rug. You need to understand the full extent of your actions." As I left the cafe, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sorrow. I was taking control of my life, but at what cost? I had confronted Lisa with the truth, yet it felt like a hollow victory. I still loved her, or at least the person I thought she was. Now that image was shattered, replaced by a woman who had chosen infidelity over loyalty. The next few days were a whirlwind. I continued to gather information about Jake while also preparing to confront him directly. I wanted him to know that I wasn't going to let him get away with this, that I was ready to expose him for the fraud he was. I reached out to a few of the individuals I had spoken with earlier, and they agreed to meet up. We shared our experiences and discussed the possibility of taking action against Jake. The more we talked, the more certain I became that I wasn't alone in this fight. After several meetings, we decided to form a small coalition to confront Jake. We would gather our evidence and approach him together. I felt a sense of solidarity with these people, a bond forged through shared betrayal and the desire for justice. When the day finally came to confront Jake, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. We agreed to meet at a public coffee shop where he often held meetings. I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a pivotal moment in my life. As the clock ticked closer to our meeting time, I watched the door, anticipating his arrival. When he walked in, I felt a surge of adrenaline. He looked so smug, so self-assured. I couldn't help but resent everything he represented, success built on the backs of people he had deceived. When we approached him, I could see the surprise in his eyes, but it quickly shifted to a guarded demeanor as he sensed the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" he asked, glancing between us. I took a deep breath, ready to unleash the truth. This was my moment, my opportunity for revenge, and I was prepared to make it count. As I launched into a tirade about his deceitful practices, I could see the realization dawn on his face. He was about to face the consequences of his actions, and I wouldn't let him slink away unscathed. This was just the beginning of my fight. I was prepared to take on Jake and everything he stood for, and I was ready to ensure both he and Lisa suffered the consequences of their choices. It was time to reclaim my life and show them that they could not get away with betrayal. As I stood there, facing Jake alongside my newfound allies, I could feel a rush of adrenaline coursing through me. I was determined to hold him accountable for everything he had done, not just to me, but to the countless people he had exploited in his pursuit of success. The stakes were high, but I was ready. I had gathered the evidence. I just needed to expose the truth and ensure he faced the ramifications of his actions. "Jake, we know what you've been doing," I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "You've been misleading investors and hurting people with your shady business practices. We're here to make sure." "Everyone knows." He laughed, a cocky smirk on his face. "What are you talking about? I've built a successful company. You're just a bitter husband who can't handle the fact that your wife is with someone better." The insult stung, but I pressed on. "You think this is just about my marriage? You've hurt people, Jake. You've taken money from hardworking individuals and left them high and dry. We're not going to let that slide." The tension in the room escalated. A few of the people I had gathered began to pull out printed evidence, testimonials, emails, receipts of investments gone wrong. As they laid everything out before him, the atmosphere shifted. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross Jake's face. "What is this?" he said, his bravado wavering. "You're not going to ruin my reputation with this nonsense." I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "Oh, we're just getting started. We're going to ensure that everyone knows the truth about you and your company. You think you can hide behind your charm and your pretty little startup? Not anymore." People in the cafe began to turn their heads, drawn to the commotion. Jake's cockiness began to crumble as we stood united, presenting our evidence. I could see the realization dawning on him that this wasn't just an angry husband confronting him. This was a coalition of betrayed individuals ready to fight back. "You think you can win this?" he sneered, trying to regain control. "I have lawyers, I have connections, you're just a bunch of nobodies." But his words felt empty. The more he spoke, the more I realized that he was scared. The evidence we had was damning, and it was only a matter of time before the truth would come to light. "You might have connections, but you can't escape the truth, Jake. Everything you've done will come to light, and we're going to make sure of that." With that, I pulled out a folder filled with information I had painstakingly compiled, a timeline of events, records of misleading communication, and testimonies from former employees and clients who had fallen victim to his lies. I dropped it on the table in front of him with a thud, the sound reverberating through the air. As the cafe buzzed around us, Jake's confidence shattered. "You're going to regret this." He threatened, his voice low and menacing, but my resolve only hardened. I was no longer the victim, I was the one taking control. "Regret? No, Jake, I'm finally taking back what you stole from me. You'll regret underestimating me," I shot back. The words felt empowering, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had spent too long in the shadows, allowing fear and doubt to dictate my actions. After our confrontation, we agreed to meet again to strategize our next steps. I felt a sense of camaraderie with the group I had joined, people who had all faced betrayal at the hands of the same man. We shared our stories, and with each revelation, the bond grew stronger. In the following days, I noticed changes in myself. I began to feel a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. I started channeling my anger and hurt into taking action rather than wallowing in despair. I was no longer just the husband who had been cheated on. I was a man on a mission to bring down the person who had hurt me and others like me. Meanwhile, the dynamic with Lisa grew more tense. She was desperately trying to salvage our relationship, but I wasn't ready to entertain her pleas for forgiveness. Every time she reached out, it felt like a reminder of the betrayal that had shattered our lives. I could see the anguish in her eyes, but I was also aware of the internal conflict she faced. Did she truly regret her actions, or was she simply afraid of facing the consequences? I decided to confront her again, but this time I was clear about my intentions. "Lisa, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about what you've done and who you've chosen to associate with." I could see the pain in her expression as I laid out the facts about Jake, the evidence I had collected, and the coalition that was forming against him. "I'm trying to make things right, Mark. I've ended things with him. Can't we just move forward?" she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Move forward," I echoed incredulously. "How can I trust you again? You've destroyed everything we built together. You chose him over me, and now you want to pretend like nothing happened. I can't just forgive and forget." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. "You need to face the reality of your actions. I'm not interested in rekindling our relationship until you truly understand what you've done." Her face fell as I walked away, leaving her standing there in the dim light of our living room. I knew she was hurting, but I couldn't allow myself to be swayed by her tears. I had to stay focused on the bigger picture, on bringing down Jake and ensuring that both he and Lisa would face the repercussions of their choices. As I continued my campaign against Jake, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. I was taking charge and standing up for myself. The more I delved into exposing Jake's deceit, the more I realized how deeply I had underestimated my own strength. The day came when we scheduled a meeting with a journalist from a local news outlet, someone who was interested in shining a light on corrupt business practices in the tech industry. I felt a sense of anticipation bubbling within me as I prepared for this next step. As I sat across from the journalist, recounting our experiences and presenting the evidence, I could see the interest in their eyes. "This is powerful stuff," they said, leaning forward. "I think we can make a compelling story out of this." The thrill of potentially taking Jake down intensified my resolve. I was doing this not just for myself, but for all those who had been wronged by him. I was ready to expose the truth. Little did I know that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test my limits and ultimately shape my future. The storm was coming, and I was prepared to weather it, ready to fight back against the betrayal that had turned my life upside down. The day of the publication felt surreal. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, speaking with victims, and preparing for the fallout. I had no idea how Jake would respond to the article exposing his fraudulent practices, but I knew it would be huge. The journalist and I had worked closely, crafting a story that detailed not just his deceitful actions, but also the impact on the individuals he had wronged. Finally, the day arrived. As the article went live, I sat on my couch, heart racing. I had set up alerts on my phone, waiting to see how the world would react. I watched as notifications flooded in, likes, shares, and comments. People were outraged. Investors were coming forward to share their stories, many expressing how they felt duped and betrayed. I felt a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. The consequences of my actions were unfolding rapidly, and I was at the center of a storm. I scrolled through social media, seeing my name linked with the article. I had become an advocate for those who had suffered at Jake's hands, and it felt empowering. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure no one else fell victim to his schemes. That evening, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Lisa. I hesitated, feeling the familiar mix of anger and sadness. She had been trying to reach out since the confrontation, but I had avoided her. I picked up the phone, uncertain of what to expect. "Mark, I saw the article." Her voice cracked, and I could sense the emotions beneath her words. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never realized how serious this was." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "You were in the middle of it, Lisa. You chose to ignore the signs. This isn't just about you being sorry. It's about the people you hurt, including me. I know I want to help. I can't change the past, but I want to be part of doing something good now," she pleaded, desperation lacing her voice. "Help with what? You want to help me take down the man you were cheating on me with? You think that makes any sense?" I could feel the anger bubbling up again. "Please just listen. I know I messed up, but I don't want to be part of this toxic environment anymore. I want to support you and the people he's hurt," she said, her tone shifting to one of urgency. "I want to show you that I can change." I paused, torn between my anger and the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she meant it. "What do you propose? You think you can just swoop in and fix this?" "I want to help warn others, maybe even help gather more evidence against him. I can reach out to contacts at the startup. They might have more information," she suggested hesitantly. I considered her words. Part of me screamed to shut her down immediately, to throw her betrayal back in her face and walk away. But another part of me recognized that she wasn't the only one who had been played. Jake had manipulated her, too, and perhaps there was a greater cause here beyond our shattered relationship. "Fine, but understand this, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for the people he hurt and for myself. You need to earn my trust back, and that's going to take time," I said, my voice steady but firm. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I can do that. I want to do that. I'm ready to help," she replied, her voice filled with determination. As we hung up, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions crash over me. I had just opened the door to working with the very person who had betrayed me, but I also recognized that we both had a common enemy. If we could unite against Jake, it might bring some closure, though I knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. In the days that followed, Lisa and I began to work together, albeit cautiously. She reached out to contacts within her company, and I maintained constant communication with the journalist. We aimed to gather as much information about Jake's practices as possible, ensuring we had a solid case against him. It was strange collaborating with Lisa. There were moments of tension, and I couldn't help but reflect on the hurt she had caused me, but I also began to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with. She was passionate and driven, determined to make amends in any way she could. We shared stories of our experiences, and for the first time since the betrayal, I felt a sense of connection growing in the midst of the chaos. One evening, as we sifted through documents, she looked up at me, her expression serious. "Mark, I really want you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I was so caught up in my own insecurities that I lost sight of what mattered." I met her gaze, searching for signs of sincerity. "It's going to take a long time for me to trust you again, Lisa. I hope you understand that. But if you're committed to helping and making things right, then we can move forward together." Tension hung in the air, but for the first time I felt a glimmer of hope. We were both broken in different ways, but perhaps, with time and effort, we could figure out how to rebuild, whether it was our relationship or simply a shared mission. As we continued our work, guiding the journalist and preparing to take further action against Jake, I felt renewed purpose emerging from the ashes of my betrayal. I was not just a victim, I was becoming a fighter, driven to reclaim my life and advocate for others who had been hurt. The battle was far from over, but I was no longer fighting alone. I had Lisa by my side, and together, we were preparing to take the next step toward exposing Jake and ensuring he faced the consequences of his deceit. With every piece of evidence we gathered and every story we shared, I felt a little more empowered, ready to face whatever came next. Little did I know that the confrontation with Jake would not only test my resolve, but also force me to confront my feelings about Lisa one last time. The final showdown was looming, and it was going to change everything. The final confrontation with Jake loomed closer, and I could feel the tension building. We had gathered substantial evidence, and the journalist was ready to run a follow-up piece that would include everything we had amassed. This would be the moment of truth, the culmination of our efforts to expose him for the fraud he was. But along with the anticipation, I felt a deep sense of dread. Lisa and I met in the days leading up to the article's release to finalize our approach. I could see the determination in her eyes, but I also noticed the vulnerability that lingered beneath the surface. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart raced. "I am. I want to make this right, Mark. I want to help put an end to him," she replied, her voice firm but laced with uncertainty. I nodded, appreciating her commitment, though I was still cautious. The day of the article's release arrived, and with it came a wave of anxiety that washed over me. We were scheduled to meet Jake in a public park, a neutral territory where we could confront him without escalating the situation into something regrettable. The plan was to give him one last chance to redeem himself before the article went live. As we approached the park, I felt a mixture of anger and anticipation. I had spent so long preparing for this moment, and now that it was here, I wrestled with my feelings about Jake and Lisa. I had been betrayed, and yet here I was, working alongside the woman who had hurt me. The complexity of it all was suffocating, but I pushed those thoughts aside. When we spotted Jake, he was sitting on a bench, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as we approached, and the casual confidence he usually exuded faltered for just a moment. "What's this? A little reunion?" He sneered, though there was an unmistakable edge of anxiety in his voice. "Jake, we need to talk," I said, my tone even. "We know all about the fraud you've been running, and we're ready to expose you." He leaned back, attempting to regain his composure. "You think you can scare me with your little coalition? I'll bury you in legal fees. You don't know who you're dealing with." "That's where you're wrong," I shot back, pulling out the folder filled with evidence. "We have documented proof of your deceitful practices. This isn't just hearsay, it's going to be published in a major news outlet." Jake's eyes narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind, calculating his next move. "You think that's enough to take me down? I've got connections. You'll regret this." "You're the one who should be worried," I said, my voice rising with conviction. "You've hurt too many people, and it's time for you to face the consequences." In that moment, I felt a rush of power. I was no longer the victim. I was in control, ready to take back my life. Lisa stood beside me, a silent reminder of our shared mission and the fragile progress we had made. "Mark, let's not escalate this," she interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. "We're giving you a chance to make things right, Jake. You can choose to cooperate, or we'll make sure everyone knows the truth about you." Jake laughed, but it lacked its usual bravado. "And what do you think you can do? You're nothing without me." I stepped closer, my fists clenched at my sides. "We're nothing without the truth, and that's what you're terrified of. You've built your empire on lies, and it's all coming crashing down." As the confrontation unfolded, I noticed a shift in Jake. The cockiness was fading, replaced by desperation. He was realizing that he was backed into a corner and the walls were closing in. "Fine, you think you can take me down. Let's see what you've got," he spat. But his bravado didn't match the fear in his eyes. I had struck a nerve, and I could feel the victory just within my grasp. As we wrapped up the confrontation, I felt a surge of energy coursing through me. I was ready to face whatever came next. When Lisa and I left the park, a sense of relief washed over me. We had taken a bold stand against Jake. And regardless of the outcome, I knew we had done the right thing. The article went live the following day and the fallout was immediate. Social media exploded with reactions and the public was outraged by Jake's actions. Investors came forward, sharing their stories, and soon enough, his facade began to crumble. The truth had a way of surfacing, and there was no escaping it now. As the dust settled, I found myself reflecting on everything that had transpired. The betrayal had shattered my world, but it had also ignited a fire within me. I had faced my pain head-on and transformed it into a mission to seek justice. In the weeks that followed, I continued to work with the journalist and the coalition, advocating for those affected by Jake's deceit. Lisa remained a part of that journey, and I began to see her in a new light. It was complicated, but we were both learning and growing from the experience. I couldn't deny that there were still scars that needed healing, but I found hope in the idea that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild trust. It wouldn't be easy, but the path ahead felt less daunting with every step we took together. Ultimately, I learned that betrayal, while painful, could also serve as a catalyst for growth and empowerment. I had faced my worst fears and emerged on the other side. Life would never be the same, but I was ready to embrace whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that I could overcome anything. In sharing my story, I hope to encourage others who find themselves in similar situations. It's never too late to reclaim your life, stand up for yourself, and seek the truth. You may be tested, but remember that you hold the power to change your narrative. And sometimes, the most profound growth comes from the deepest wounds.